I'm Christine Chicoyan, the pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Lake Forest, and it's my privilege to be your moderator here tonight. We're all here because we love our community, and we're all here because we love our kids. And it's really important to come together, to be together at such a time as this. The tragic deaths of 3 young people in the last 3 months, Fareed Hussein, Will Lascaro-Toskowski, and most recently, Edward Scott. These deaths have broken our hearts, and they've also caused us to question many things. I want to start by saying first that our prayers continue to be with those families whose heartbreak exceeds anything that we're feeling right now. Let us never forget the profound grief that each one of them is bearing. All of us want to do something, but what is it we are to do? The pastors in this town are no different than everybody else in wanting to do something. So last Wednesday, the day after Edward's funeral, Jay Sidebottom, the rector of Church of the Holy Spirit, reached out to 4 of us other pastors in town. We talked about a number of different things. The range of thoughts and feelings our children and youth might be having right now. How to help these young people share what's going on inside of them. How to identify youth who are in distress. How to process our own feelings, which no matter how old we are, end up feeling like a roller coaster ride. How we can identify values and behaviors that can make our community stronger and safer. What resources we have that are already available. That's what we talked about last Wednesday. Tonight, less than a week later, this is the first fruits of that meeting. We don't imagine that suddenly this one meeting will make everything hunky-dory. We don't imagine that everything will ever be perfect, nor do we think that we alone are going to create some solution. We are grateful beyond words that this is hardly the only event that's happening in our community. The schools, Croya, LEAD, religious and nonprofit groups, so many of them are coming together, therapists, hospitals doing what they can. And all of us are in it together, and I'm grateful for that. We're in it together in honest recognition of challenges and our sorrow, and we're in it together in our commitment to compassion and well-being. So for tonight's schedule, from now until 8 o'clock, we'll have an informational presentation followed by a panel response to your questions. If you haven't had a chance to fill out a card and would like to do so, raise your hand and make sure that you have a card. And later, I will be receiving these cards from the docents or ushers who will be collecting them. Then from 8 to 9, we'll have small group discussions that are moderated by a trained counselor. These breakout groups are designed to be sort of a workshop, a place to begin to share your feelings, your concerns, your hopes, that we can be a community together. Before I introduce the panel, I briefly want to thank others who have made this evening possible. Betty Frank Bailey, Executive Director of LEAD and the Speak Up Coalition. Dr. David Schreiber, Director of Compass Health Center in Northbrook, a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. Small group moderators and resource people include representatives from Compass, from Erica's Lighthouse, from Alyssa's Mission, from Lake Forest College, from Maria Malin's group, from the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital staff, the North Shore Highland Park Hospital staff, Samaritan Counseling Center, and Willow House, and no doubt there are others as well. It has been an overwhelming outpouring of care. Let me introduce the panelists before you. We have Carol Hines, who is an RN, MSN, CS Program Manager for Evanston Day School, which is part of North Shore University Health System Department of Psychiatry. We have Todd Nahigian, familiar to many of you as the director of Croya. He's been with Croya 17 years, since he was about 5 years old, I think. We have Nancy Perlson, who is an MA, LSW, RYT, who's with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and who is a survivor and outreach coordinator, yoga bereavement counselor, and has recently led a group for Edward's Friends. Thank you. And we have Julie Rickenberger, who is an MA, LPC, Child, Adolescent, and Family Development Center, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention board member, and she too a survivor. And last but not least, our keynote presenter. Dr. Robert Edgar is both a general psychiatrist and a child and adolescent psychiatrist. His practice is downtown with Northwestern. His work emphasizes the importance of family and community as powerful tools in healing. His clinical interests include ADD, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, phobic disorders, adolescence, manic depression, panic disorder, mood disorders, OCD, and adult ADHD. I've known Bob for many years. When I was serving down at the staff of Fourth Presbyterian Church downtown, I admire his work very much, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. Bob, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be asked to come here tonight. What I'm going to start out with is we're going to try to identify the three things that might drive suicidal behavior. And it's depression, manic depression, and anxiety disorders. Those are the main ones. I mean, there's tons of other things, but that's the bulk of things. Let's get right down to work, okay? When we have a depressive disorder, a depression, what you look for as parents and as friends is change. Change from the usual usual presentation of the child or adolescent. Change, withdrawal. One of the things I see often in my practice is a teenager who withdraws from his or her friends. That's trouble right there. Change, okay? Giving up of interest, giving up of friends, as I mentioned. Grades go down, they go south. That's a tip-off for depression. Decreased or increased sleep changes. Irritability and agitation. Again, it's this concept of change from presentation, okay? Change. Depression and bipolar and anxiety disorder are all genetic conditions. They run in families. It comes from your genes. There are even elaborate genes that are indicated and implicated. No one gene has ever been found, though, to cause these things, but many are implicated. Now, in depression, it's important to identify depression and treat it, obviously, but here's a little fact to it. I thought I'd drop in a few facts and figures. If you have a depressed child or teenager, within 5 years, that child or adolescent will switch into mania at a rate of 40%. So children and adolescents who have depression are at risk for going into bipolar disorder, because depression may be the gateway towards having that condition. Okay. Now, depressive disorders are often accompanied by substance abuse and anxiety. Those are the main things that follow along, like unwanted cousins, okay? They come with the package, and we treat those and identify those. 90% of suicides, not just in kids, but in all age groups, are from mental illnesses, depression, bipolar, and anxiety disorders. Now, people kind of give anxiety disorders short shrift and say, oh, just anxious. No, Anxiety is one of the cardinal features of people who attempt or commit suicide. Anxiety. Okay, bipolar disorder. Now, what is that? That's very controversial. What is it? In children especially, it's controversial. In adolescents, it begins to look what it's like in adults. But here it is basically, this may surprise you, but mostly bipolar disorder is chronic recurrent depressions. Chronic recurrent depressions. And thrown into that pot is irritabilities, maybe little hypomanias. But chronic recurrent depressions are the hallmark of manic depression. The manias, yeah, they come, but they're not that common, not statistically. What do we see in bipolar disorder? We see euphoria, grandiosity. I think I'm better than everybody. Euphoria in kids is kind of nonstop giggling, but it is not fun. Okay, euphoria. Pressured speech. I didn't do that on purpose, but that's true. You can't interrupt them, you know. And a decreased need for sleep, and they don't miss it. Okay. Suicides happen early in a depressive episode. That's why it's important to keep our antenna up and really identify depressive mood disorders, because that's when suicides happen, early in the course of the illness. These are brain diseases. They occur in the brain. We know where they occur in the brain. We should keep in mind these are real medical illnesses, and they do not occur just in the brain, actually. It's shocking what we know about depression, how they affect the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system, the pancreas, that's part of the endocrine system. It's pretty shocking. It's not just a disease or condition above the ears, okay? Now, talking about depression, talking about suicide, does not drive somebody into a suicidal state. As a matter of fact, somebody who's suicidal may be relieved that somebody asked them about it. So please be aware of that. Please ask. If you suspect, ask. You won't push the process along. You may actually help it and help heal it up. Well, if I could just emphasize one thing tonight, it's that. Ask, okay? Now, we often want to know, well, what protects people from suicide? You know, well, there's not a whole lot out there that protects a person from suicide, protects a teenager, for example. But there's one thing that has been shown scientifically through research that does protect a child, adolescent from suicide, and that is having a faith-based community, going to church or synagogue. Yeah. Okay, treatments of depression and suicidality. You know, hospital is still a pretty good place to be because they provide safety. And you must, if you identify depression, you got to take your child to the emergency room. It's that cut and dry, that black and white. And if you don't have the nerve to do that, ask for help. Call the police. But get them there, okay? It's better to overreact than underreact, okay? It's better to have a little egg on your face than to suffer the consequences. The treatments that we use for medications are all the usual cast of characters. The antidepressants like Prozac, Celexa, Lexapro, all those, they're very good, and they help. They help treat depression. What I am more and more using in my practice for suicidal patients are what we call mood stabilizers. And one of them is lithium. I use it especially in suicidal patients, whether they're adolescents or in adults. Lithium has a scary connotation, but it helps prevent suicide. This has been really scientifically shown. You can look it up on the internet. Great studies. The bottom line, clinically, it works. Lamictal or lamotrigine. These are my bread and butter medications. They work. Thank you for listening to me. We got a great panel. We're going to turn it over to them. Thanks. Ed.
Thank you, Bob. I've been collecting some of the cards. I would ask if our ushers or docents or whatever we're calling them would please walk the aisles now and collect other cards, but I'm going to start our conversation with some of the questions that have already come in. There are lots of good questions. I'm going to actually turn this off and move to the move here. Okay. Here's a question about resources that we have that are available. A question from a number of people. It's hard to find a place for everyone. There are kids who seek solace with peers, places of worship, Kroya, school counselor, favorite teacher, but there are plenty of kids who stay away from any and all of them. What if we were to create a new option that hasn't been tried before? A network of fairy godmothers or fathers, a hotline, people like us who just empathize and want to be here. There's more detail about that, but I'd just like to start with Carol and find out a response.
Can you guys hear me? I think that where kids are really at is using social media and the internet. I work in a therapeutic school, so I'm with a small group of kids who probably about 75% of them have made suicide attempts, have had multiple hospitalizations, and so I'm pretty much aware of what's going on with the kids, and so they like to use the internet, they like to use Facebook, they talk to each other that way. So I've actually found some really good internet sites that are really good for kids, and there's a sheet out there. I don't know if I probably didn't make enough because there's not more people here than I thought, but one of the places they can go is a place called Erica's Lighthouse, and I know that Peggy Kubert is here. She's part of Erica's Lighthouse. She's down there.
Peggy, would you stand and so people can see who you are in case they want to catch up with you later?
But they have a wonderful website. They also have this handbook for parents, which I know Peggy brought some, but you can download this from the internet. So it's ericaslighthouse.org. And it's Erica with a K. And there's videos on there that the kids can watch. There's other teenagers that are talking, and so that's one place. But there are lots of other internet resources which I have on the list and are also listed in the back of this book, which the parent handbook is on the internet as well. So
that's great.
Good.
And I'm gonna toss to Todd something that you started to raise that comes up in another question. What role do you think about social media and any way that social networking plays for good or ill in terms of depression in adolescents? And what are you hearing?
It's a great question. There's no question that technology has taken over. We know that. But one of the things to remember is that as a parent, you can take the role and take the lead as to what you expect and let your kid know the expectations that are in your home. There's no question that everybody's going to have another access, maybe at a friend's house or at some other place. But I think that kids don't realize, they don't have those conversations enough, that social media puts things out there for everyone to see. And they're not thinking about that. They're sending a message to one or two friends, and they find out later that the whole school has seen it, or all their group of friends. And I think that one of the things that we have to do is help our kids understand those things, because sometimes the unintended causes the depression. They find that something has happened and now we've seen it recently with kids that put things out there and they stir up so much mess that people are feeling like they want to target that person, and that person takes a lot of the brunt, but they never intended to make that message the way that people took it.
So one of the things that parents can do is, to the extent possible, keep track. I mean, I have access to my kid's Facebook, you know, and she's 20, so if she were 8, I don't know. Well, anyway, accessing that. The other question that leads to is for one of the clinicians here. There's a lot of questions here about. Okay, so you see this kind of activity going on. How can a parent track more what's going on? Is depression from loneliness? What are signs of anxiety that lead to it? Is depression purely a chemical imbalance? For those who haven't been in the clinical world, what is it that we can look for?
Are you looking at me?
Sure.
Okay. Depression it's actually a brain disorder. So I think for all of us as parents, being here tonight really kind of pushes against that stigma created around suicide and mental illness, and learning how to talk about depression and learning how to understand how to communicate with our kids in a way that takes it out of this kind of dreamy state that depression is a character flaw. That if there's something, you know, that if you feel lousy, then there's something wrong with you and you can just snap out of it by going to run a mile. And the reality is that these disorders are disorders, like the doctor said, in the brain. And so recognizing that having a chemical disorder and having depression is a whole lot different than having a bad day, which most of your kids will have a bad day. They'll do badly on a test, they'll get in a fight with a friend, they'll get in a fight with one of you, and a bad day does not constitute clinical depression. But true clinical depression is an illness, and so the way we talk about it, the way we can medicalize it, takes the onus off, takes the stigma out of talking about suicide and mental illness as an illness itself that we can treat, that we can talk about it in terms of the way we talk about heart disease, the way we talk about cancer. So the way we educate and talk about it ourselves will help them.
That raises another question. Parents are asking, there's a few of these here, how do you start the conversation with your child? How do you ask if your child is suicidal or depressed? Do you have tips for facilitating that conversation? If you suspect your child is depressed or anxious, how do you enforce limits that are helpful to them? And I don't know, Bob, maybe you could take this one.
Well, there's no right or wrong answer to that. And,
Oh, come on.
Well, but here's my rule of thumb. You do it. You just do it. Even if it's awkward, uncomfortable, even if you're just a klutz, you do it. You dive into it. And again, somebody who's suicidal or thinking about harming themselves, in reality, they're going to feel relieved that somebody cares. So you do it. You dive into it. Be yourself.
I'd like to add to that. I think that it's so vital to provide an environment that when you ask the question, that the person you're asking knows that you're going to listen and that you're going to be available to the answer. So many times we have an expectation when we ask the question of what the answer already is. And we see that every day with kids. We see it every day with families and parents. You want the right answer. How are you today? Oh, I'm good. But you know what? When people aren't good, they have to be given that opportunity. And what active listening tells is that you sit and you actually listen and process and figure out what it is that people are going through. And it can be your kids, it can be your friends, it can be your spouse. But until you actually sit and listen and appreciate what that person's going through and try to show empathy and try to really appreciate where they're coming from, then they won't want to come to you, and they don't think that they'll have that basis and that strength to come to you for that support, because they won't think that it's there. And I'll tell you, the teenagers that I know, they get it, and they can see it a mile away, whether you're really interested or whether you just asked the question because that's what you're supposed to do.
Julie wants to tag on that, and I know you have some ideas about that too.
Just a few. When you're talking about diving in and just, asking and just talking about it, you need to specifically ask, are you thinking about suicide? And that's a scary question for even us clinicians that deal with that on a daily basis to ask. What if they say yes? I mean, it's scary. But that, like, you know, the rest of the panelists have been saying, it opens up an avenue for your kids to talk. And when they talk about it, it's going to be sad. You don't want to hear your kid, you know, that your kid is this sad or that they're thinking about suicide. And don't tell them that, oh, don't think about suicide, or don't do that, or let's just, you know, don't shorten the conversation because you're scared. If you don't know what to say, just say, I'm here for you, and sometimes that's enough.
Go ahead. A couple of things. First of all, just to kind of let you know that there's research that supports what we're saying. In 2004, the American Psychological Association published a paper that stated that talking about suicide does not make it happen. And so rest assured that if you bring it up, you're not planting ideas. And I think that that's the problem that so many people, if I bring it up, if I ask them, then I'm creating that. I'm giving them the thought that maybe it's there. What happens in reality is that it gives us an opportunity to identify those kids that are most at risk. And part of what I wanted to say to you is that whether you realize it or not, and you may get a lot of eye rolling at home because I know with 2 teenage boys I do, but the truth of the matter is they look to us as their parents and their caregivers to provide support, with truth and honesty in approaching the way we handle all of these situations. So having all of you here is really an opportunity to really think about what's being stirred up for me and what do I need to do to take care of myself so that I can move forward and parent my child with, you know, efficiency and in a healthy way to get them the help and support that they need. So it really starts with our own self-awareness, our ability to be able to communicate and to be able to be authentic with our kids, because they know when we're not being authentic, we have to be honest and we have to be truthful, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, and then get back to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Whether it's someone who's young that I deal with in pastoral care, or somebody who's 90 years old, the making room for that conversation is a great relief to them. The isolation, one of the things about depression is that it's an enormously isolating illness. And to draw your child into a conversation is really, really useful. I want to ask also about, it relates actually to the first question that somebody asked, that idea of surrogates or others in the community. Some of us don't have the greatest relationship with our kids. Some of us are less available than we'd like to be because we're going through our own stuff. Some of us, there's history, whatever the reason is, it takes a village. So how do we help our kids, or how can we know where there's help for our kids? Find resources, therapists, somebody after school, other adults in the community. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it makes a lot of sense that in adolescence, kids are breaking away from their parents and breaking away from their family to form their own identity. We've all done it, been there, now they're doing it. And part of that's really hard because you've had these young children that have cozied up to you and you've been their hero for 12, 13 years, and now they flip on you, they change on you. They're not going to share with you the intimate details of all the things in their life. You're going to get a few things here and there, and that's just the way it is. So to find out who they're hanging out with and connect with the parents of those kids. Find out where they stand on things. Find out what kinds of messages they're getting when they're at their homes. And to be really blunt, you'll see it from your own kids' friends who come to you to talk. We've had so many calls about parents that say, I'm closer to my kids' friends than I am to my own kid. Well, that's because they're a 17-year-old boy. The other piece of this is to know that there are coaches, there are counselors, there are resources all over the community. You just have to open your eyes, or you have to call, and there are people there to help you. Croya works extremely close with the schools to provide referrals and resources for kids that are in need. But there are resources like tonight. This is exciting to see all the people that have come out that have an ability to support us.
Yeah. That actually leads to another related question. If you see a child, an adolescent, who is one of your kids' friends, who's exhibiting depressive, manic depressive, anxiety disordered, suicidal behaviors, what do you do then?
Well, I can answer that. I think that, as Todd said, I think it's important to know the parents of your kids' friends and to not hesitate to talk to them about concerns that you have. And, it's not like you're, trying to get them in trouble or anything. It's like you want to help, and you just, it's okay to say to a parent, I've noticed that, when, so-and-so is over, their appetite hasn't been as good, or they're coming over and they're sleeping, because I've had friends of my kids that come over and they just go right downstairs and sleep on the couch, and you say, what? But I don't hesitate to tell the parents that, like, what's going on? Is there something happening at home? Or just to let them know what you're seeing and that you're there to support them. And I've, and to try to be a support to the parent, because it's very hard for parents when they have kids that are going through things. They need somebody to support them, because it's really tough situation.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else want to?
I was just going to say, on that same subject, I know that that's a really hard thing to do if you know that a child is in trouble. And should I make that call? And I have to say, think about if it was your child that was struggling. Would you appreciate that phone call, and would you be grateful? And so sometimes just putting ourselves in that other position, it's a hard phone call to make, but it's really, really important that we engage. It does take a village, and sometimes it takes more than a village, as you can see from the number of communities that are represented here and the number of resources. But to be able to do that, oftentimes when I'm talking with kids, they say, well, if I tell somebody, my friend will be mad at me. It's like, you know what? They get over being mad. Yeah. The other option, you don't get over. So the reality is that switch it around and think about, if it was your child, it's a hard phone call to receive, but it's an important phone call to receive.
I want to add, just to emphasize what Nancy said earlier about taking care of yourself. If you do receive that phone call, or if you give that phone call, make sure that you're processing that with, the parent you call, or, some of your support, because that's also very scary. And I do want to emphasize also again that not everybody not every child or adolescent that is depressed is going to eventually die by suicide. That's
right.
One thing to add relating to taking care of ourselves as adults, it's kind of, think of it like that metaphor when you're on a plane and they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then on your child. If you aren't capable and you are going through your own stuff, which we all have our own stuff that we're dealing with on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, whatever it may be, and you can get support for those things, you're modeling the behavior that you're wanting your kids to create for themselves when they hit the time that they leave the nest. But if you haven't shown them how the person that they look up to and that's their role model goes for help when they're in time of need, if you never show that you're vulnerable, if you never show that you've needed someone else to get through, then they won't see that and they won't get that message.
Yeah, that's right. That leads to other questions. There's so many great questions here, and we're going to get to as many as we can. Once you realize that your child needs help, how do you find the best therapist or counselor? What if your child refuses help? What if they've been through treatment and they're on the edge again? Are they likely to need help again? How do you push something forward with your child when the oppositional years are in full force?
I just want to say that try not to do it alone, because I think, if you're really worried about your kid, let other people that know your child know that you're worried about your kid, so that you don't feel like you're doing this all by yourself. If they have, a favorite teacher, a coach, another, parent, that is, a close friend of theirs that they know, to say, I'm really worried about, Susie and, can you help me with this, and elicit their help. So that's one thing. Don't do it by yourself. The other thing is in terms of finding a therapist and resources, I don't know. I mean, there's so much out there, and it's really hard to know what's going to be a good fit and what's going to help. I mean, obviously, if you have some really immediate concerns, like you're concerned that your child may not be safe, then that's a trip to the emergency room or call the paramedics, because you need a professional to evaluate that child, and you shouldn't be afraid to ask them. We've talked about this. If you're suicidal, if they say, yes, I've been thinking about suicide, then find out, are you thinking about it like today? What's stopping you? But you really should have a professional evaluate that child if they're saying that they have suicidal thoughts, and that's, like I said, a trip to the emergency room. If you're just concerned about your child, like it's not an immediate thing, and they're struggling, and you see that they're not doing as well at school, maybe they're crying a lot, maybe they're sleeping a lot, maybe they're not seeing any of their friends, they're withdrawing from people, they've dropped off of a lot of teams or activities. I mean, those are all huge warning signs of depression, and you really do need to find somebody. And you can, word of mouth is a good thing. You can call any of the people on this panel, all the lists on the resources that we've given. Talk to if you belong to a church or a synagogue, talk to your pastor or the rabbi, and there's lots of resources out there. There also are a lot of crisis lines that you can call. I don't know if you want me to answer if they're resistant. Do you want me to get into that too?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to talk too much, but sometimes kids will refuse to go to treatment, and then what we always say is that if you're not willing to get help from, we look at it in the school wording as like least restrictive to most restrictive. So a least restrictive environment would be going to talk to a therapist maybe once a week. If a child's not willing to do that, and you're really concerned and they're having serious problems, then they need the next level, which might be an intensive outpatient program where they're going in the evenings after school 4 or 5 days a week. And if they're not going to get help from that, then they might need the next level of care, and all the way up to needing to be in the hospital. So that's just an important thing to know.
Bob, and then
Can I weigh in on that?
and then Nancy.
Because very few children and teenagers come to my office and express enthusiasm about being there. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, so, but if they, I take that as normative. If they really are enthusiastic about being in my office, I don't know, that's worse. But now here's my thought about somebody who doesn't want to get treatment, and they don't want to come in. Always be gentle. I think that always works. But always be gentle and set limits too. You say, Johnny, you are going to see Dr. Edger. No, but you are. And I've learned over the years that after a while they kind of get used to it and kind of like it in a backhanded way. Now, if there's tremendous resistance, I'm going to echo what you said. The ace you have up your sleeve, your real power, is when you come in as a family. It's not just mom bringing Johnny in, it's mom and dad bringing Johnny in. Maybe mom and dad and Aunt Susie, or brother and sister. There's a power that a family has. Use it. But please, in a gentle way, set limits, because the stakes are high, very high. Okay?
Just a quick thing, kind of piggybacking on that don't be afraid to parent. I think that when things are vulnerable, or when your child you think is at risk, or when things in your home are unstable, oftentimes as parents we take the path of least resistance because we don't want to rock the boat. And the reality is that we have a very small window of opportunity to parent our children. And so it's about being empowered as parents to do what's right for our children, and to step forward and know that that's your responsibility as a parent, and that they do look to us for, they may fight us on it, but they look to us for boundaries. They look to us to set limits for them and to help them and to let them know very gently that we're going to be with them every step of the way, and that we're doing this because we love them, and that it seems hard, but this is what we need to do. So don't be afraid to step up to the plate and rock the boat a little bit. Sometimes it needs to be rocked.
Yeah.
And be part of your child's treatment.
Yes.
Yeah, communicate with the therapist or the treatment team, and yeah, the more support your child has, the more successful they will be.
That's right. There's a question that I have for you, Dr. Edger, and that is, a few people asked about medications, and there's been some news. Of course, there's medications in the news all the time, but do medications ever increase suicidal behavior? What's the risk? What's the mechanism? What happens, any correlation of teen suicide with prescription drugs or even illegal drugs? What happens?
Well, you know, as a psychiatrist, the risk of using antidepressants, you always have to watch for that, because antidepressants as a class can do a couple of things. They can push people not only into mania, as I mentioned in my talk, but they can dysregulate mood. That doesn't sound right, does it? That you're supposed to get better if you take an antidepressant. Not always. You can really push either mania or depression. So be aware. The other thing that's very common in our society these days is stimulants, Adderall, methylphenidate, or Ritalin. They actually can be good antidepressants, yeah, but they can also push mania and destabilize mood. So those are some of the things that you want to watch out for.
Yeah,
with
and
medication.
I would suggest also keeping if your child has a different general practitioner and psychiatrist, make sure that all of the physicians are working together.
Well, that communication is the key, and you said something I think was very important. You want to communicate with the doctor. You want to communicate with the therapist. Don't just work in isolation. It's very important. Now, the other thing is that antidepressants like Prozac and all the usual ones like Lexapro, those two are actually indicated by the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, for the treatment of major depression. And they're very good, and they help get people out of depressions. Now, the thing you might have heard also in the news is that these don't work, or they make the condition worse. And, well, that's true, and we've known that for a long time. That is not news. Antidepressants don't really work in mild to moderate depression so much, and we just know that. We've known it for years, but it's been in the news. But where they really can be helpful is those people who have very severe depressions. A little interesting factoid is if you take 100 children and youth with depression and line them up, and you do absolutely nothing, 25 of those kids are going to get better, no matter what you do. If you say boo to them, if you say hi or sing a song or stand on your hands, nothing. They'll just get better, 25% of them, without any intervention at all. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change that happens in a child's life, and it can be really tricky to figure out whether this is a deep depression or whether they're acting out and trying to provoke you. One question is, how long do you have to see this change in a child's behavior before you start getting worried? Are they just being annoying or are they in trouble?
Oh, I can. Well, I mean, if you look at the DSM criteria, which you guys probably don't know, I mean, that's the manual that tells you what the criteria are for depression. They say that somebody has to be sustaining that type of behavior for 2 to 3 weeks before you can really call it a major depression. So, I mean, use your own judgment. I mean, you know your own kids. If it's lasting a period of time that you're concerned, I mean, even if it's lasting a couple of days, if it's something that's really concerning, you might need to get help. But generally, they say 2 to 3 weeks.
Great. Good. Completely different topic, something that's on everybody's minds here. There have been 3 tragic incidents in a row. Not all of them have been absolutely designated as suicides, and so we don't want to leap to those conclusions. Nevertheless, we're concerned as a community about cluster suicides. Tell us about cluster suicides, copycat suicide pact. Is it common for a community to experience multiple suicides in a community? How does that work?
It happens. And again, one suicide does not cause another suicide. So knowing that they're unrelated, oftentimes what happens when we see these clusters is you have individuals separate that are at high risk themselves. And so perhaps having a means being shown to them becomes an option, which may kind of precipitate that now they have a plan in place. But the reality is that if we do our job in screening out our kids and in listening to them when there's a tragedy and kind of hearing what they're saying, asking the questions and getting them the support that they need, helping them kind of differentiate between what's normal grieving behavior and what's over the line and what needs additional support. So you do see these clusters, but it's not that it's a copycat, it's not that it's contagious, because suicide is not contagious. It's not linked that way, but what it does is with those kids that are at risk, it brings them more at risk unless we stop it, unless we get to the point where we can address it with our kids and know who's at risk.
And this is the opportunity right now. We have an opportunity. The door's been open, unfortunately, for us to talk openly about suicide with our kids. How are they feeling about this? Share with them how you feel about this. Is this, are you scared? Are you sad? Are you confused? And just listen to them if they talk, hopefully.
Yeah, very good. A similar question that all of us are thinking about is, are there societal or community level factors that are related to depression or suicide in adolescents? Are there economic issues? Are there stressors issues? And what factors can we change for the better?
Well, suicide has no boundaries. And as we've been discussing, it is definitely a biological illness. And there, of course, are external factors that play into increasing the risk of a child. But do you want to add anything?
I'm trying to think.
Well, I could say something
Yeah.
about that too. I mean, I think that, we all know that there is a lot of pressure on high school kids now, even going down to junior high, in terms of, academic success, getting into college, getting into the right college. I know, personally, my son is a freshman in college right now, and what it was like for him and for some of his friends, and the competition for the ACT scores and how many AP classes you can get, and a lot of the colleges are looking at you have to have if you don't have this high level curriculum with that. And I think that in a lot of the families that I work with, because we do a lot of family work, I think that a lot of parents have trouble sometimes accepting when their child does not fit the model that they want them to, to be, or what they were, or not every kid is defined by their academic success. And I think that in the North Shore area, and and I'm part of it too, is that kids are often defined by their academic or their athletic success. And I've had so much personal experience with the families that I've worked with over the years that I've had to do a lot of work with families and helping them get to know each other and what is important to that child. Because I can tell you that I have I can give you a million examples, but some kids are artists. Some kids are mechanics. Some kids are, landscapers. Some kids, there's a different mold, and not every kid fits that mold. And I think that it's really important for parents to be open to the idea that, maybe my kid is not going to be taking AP classes, and maybe they're not going to be getting into one of the higher level schools, or maybe they're going to go to a technical school, and that's going to be okay with me, because the important thing is for them to be happy and to feel good about themselves and to feel like what they're doing is important to them. So.
That's great. Bob?
I'm going to bring up two things that are very hard, maybe hard to hear, but two things can really lead a child into depression. And the first of that is abuse. If there is abuse in a child, it actually can affect the body's endocrine system and lead to depression as they develop. So please, if you suspect abuse of any sort, physical, sexual, or even harsh, punitive parenting. The second thing is that we know that children who are depressed, if you look closely, please try to identify if the parents are depressed. And you can say, oh, he's blaming parents, but see beyond that. If you treat a parent who's depressed, that may be the environment that child is growing up in. So for all the people on the panel and the providers out there of healthcare, don't just assume that the child is the target patient, okay? Please have the courage to ask the moms and dads or the caretakers what their mood is. And it takes a little guts sometimes.
And it goes one step further, like we've said, empowering the people around your kids. And one of the things that I've just heard recently a lot about is the social workers and the counselors in the schools, when they're empowered by parents, given information, talked to and said, hey, I want you to look out for my kid, we're a little bit worried, or there's something that we think that you can help us with. That opens the door. It's like so many times we want to shove things under the rug and not be vulnerable. But once you open that door and you say, I'm vulnerable, I need help, I would love some support, those conversations that I have every day at Croya with parents are the most meaningful things. When we're done talking, it's like, wow, if we could just, put this on tape. Because what you did was you became vulnerable and realized there was an opportunity to get better. And that's what we're seeing all the time, but we need it on a grand scale.
Okay.
Said one thing. Remember that not everybody that doesn't do well in school or doesn't find their way in school, again, not everybody who has a bad day is going to kill themselves. So recognize that suicide is the end result of generally a multiple of factors that ends in suicide. So for us here tonight, of really creating an ability to give our children some strength and some resilience to handle adversity, that's what we're doing here. How do we move through sticky situations? How do we give them and empower them with the skills to be able to handle bad things that will happen in their lives? And I hope for everybody here that this is the worst thing that your children will ever go through. But you have an opportunity here to really teach them how to handle a difficult situation so that they're not tripped up the next time. And remember that it is a bunch of different factors. It's very rarely just singular.
I'm going to stop there and just add a couple of things from the questions that I would like to turn simply into comments. Someone said that their son took a class during lunch period called peer training, taught by Croya staff member. I can remember him sharing with me what he learned and how he used a skill to identify a friend who he thought might be depressed. Please consider this in the future. I want to add, there's another family who is concerned about how do you talk to another family whose child has committed or attempted suicide, and I would say gently, but don't pretend they're not there. Be there for them.
Chris, I'd love to address the peer training question.
Yeah, please.
The school and Croya have been working diligently to bring the peer training curriculum up to the current day and provide it with a consistent language that works well with the emotional wellness initiative at the high school. And over the years, we've taught thousands of kids how to recognize the concerns or the symptoms in their friends, because we know that they're going to go to their friends about their problems before they're going to go to an adult. And a lot of times, those classes are co-taught between Croya staff and counselors at the high school, and that's what we're going to be doing again in this fall. And our assumption is that we'll get hundreds of kids trained again as early as the fall of this year.
Yeah. It really does take a village. I want to end with someone asked, what family activities do you recommend at home? Tips for having a cheerful home. My gosh, there's lots. There's lots. But I also want to just give a little brief testimony at the end. I grew up in a depressive home. My mom was an alcoholic, and she drank because she was self-medicating for depression. We didn't have access to things back in those days. My family has a genetic predisposition to depression, and I know that. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. If we had thyroid problems, we wouldn't think twice about getting what we needed in order to deal with it. Nothing to be ashamed about, lots and lots to get help with, and I encourage you just to be as open as you can with the needs that you have, that you see in your own children, in your own family, and I encourage gentleness with one another. This is a fragile time right now, we're all feeling it, but when we come together, there is such strength, there is such compassion, there is such love. Let's trust that power. I think it's real. We're going to end this segment of our night tonight, and I want to thank our panelists and presenter. Let me brief you about what's going to happen next. I want to acknowledge that there have been members of the press who have been present, and we have asked them not to interview parents or adults or to attend small groups, that they are free to talk with presenters, but we want to create as much of a safe space as we can for all of you. Docents or ushers will be dismissing people by rows, starting with the back. And you will be directed to a room for a small group. Every small group will have, again, a counselor and some of them a clergy. If you be, wait, in order to be quiet for everybody to hear, just a second, I'll let you out, promise. If you do not want to go to a small group, that's absolutely fine. If you feel like you're in need of just a one-on-one conversation with someone, there's a room called the Green Room that has lots of living room furniture, and there'll be people there for you to talk with. We don't want anyone to go out without feeling that they have a place here. If you have more questions that you would like to ask and leave on cards, these will be collected and shared with our community leaders. Thank you all for your love of this community and your children.